Hey guys, welcome to today's webinar. It's going to be on auto action basics. So it's a great review for people that already kind of know about auto actions, and it's certainly a wonderful place to start if you're brand new to creating auto actions. I'm Sarah, so you probably have worked with me via support tickets. Maybe you've come to a webinar before, so I'm really happy to see you guys here. And then last month we did a bunch of webinars on checklists, and checklists and auto actions go together really well. I'm going to be talking a little bit more about that in a future webinar, but certainly it's a great way to apply what you learned about checklists. You can put that into automation, but we're going to go ahead and get started. Everyone is muted, but if you scroll up to the top of Join Me, there's a little chat box. You can drop in questions there, and certainly you can always follow up with questions with me directly afterwards, or use your support link. Let's see if I can go on to my next slide. So today we're going to start by talking about how to think about auto actions, because it's not always intuitive. Then I'm going to go through a couple of demonstrations to create auto actions. So I'm going to show you how to send an email to a family, how to send an email to a caseworker, and we can update a case stage. If we have time, I'm also going to talk a little bit about checklist auto actions, so your options for automation on a checklist, and also how to set a checklist item as done, especially for things that are a little less action intensive. So sometimes you are providing your family with some information and they don't necessarily have to take action on there, but you want to record that you sent that information. So if we've got time, I'll show that today. Otherwise, I'll have to push it to next webinar. All right, so when you're thinking about auto actions, you sort of have to think backward and then forward. So you begin by thinking, what is going to trigger this action? So my example is when a family's application is approved, we're going to begin the home study process. So it's that approval of the application that's triggering my action. And then you think, okay, what's going to happen next? So I know the home study process is starting. I want to do a bunch of actions. I want to insert a home study record, provide information to the family, notify the caseworker. It could be whatever it is that your agency needs, but you're always thinking trigger first, then action. And I'll show you that when I'm setting up the auto actions. Good triggers for auto actions are what I call action-oriented fields. They're date fields or status changes, things that you would probably see in your milestones area, like we talked about the application is approved. It could be that the inquiry date is not blank. Maybe the family has committed to a child. Those really big dates are great fields for automation because you know that they generally only get filled in once, and it usually has a human touch, like someone is approving this application. A caseworker is overseeing the commitment to a child, and then those dates get filled in. So I love using those as triggers. Filters are great. But they're not really necessarily the same as triggers. So a descriptive field, like a case type, wouldn't necessarily be a trigger, but it's a great way to filter auto actions. So if you want to send an email just to domestic adoptive families, that's a great filter. Any sort of demographics like location or child preferences are great filters too. All right, so just a little thing before you dive too deep into creating your own auto actions. It's a great idea to understand your process, which I always talk about at the beginning of every webinar. But there's a really great video from TED Talks about teaching people to think in terms of what comes before and what comes after. It's about diagramming how to make toast. So I'm going to go ahead and send this out at the end of the webinar to everybody, but it's just a great activity to do with your team if you're trying to say, hey guys, we want to start automating, but let's make sure we understand our process first. So you can do this for toast, then you can do it for an actual process. So I did this last night, or I guess it was a couple days ago, thinking about the application process and how I might automate it. So what I did is I just wrote out these big ideas. When the application's approved, we're going to start the home study. I want to send an email. The family is going to do something, and I'm going to tell the caseworker. And just trying to look for ways where I could automate, like beginning the home study. That just means I'm going to add a home study record. I could automate that. So I'm not going to dive too deep into process analysis, but this is just an idea that before you create auto actions, you usually need to know what's coming before and what's going to come after. So in my follow-up email, there's a little bit more information about how to do this for your individual process. But with that said, let's get started making a couple auto actions. Let's see, here I am in my SAM site. So I'm going to go ahead and use that little diagram I showed you earlier to create some auto actions regarding the home study. So the first thing I want to do is, let's say that I want to automate the home study process. So let me go to one of my families here and take a look at those milestone dates I mentioned earlier. So here's my milestones, and you might have a very similar milestone section on your cover pages. Some people call it like case stages, any sort of thing, but these are really big, important dates. So I can see here that I have this application approved date, and I'm going to go ahead and use that as my trigger for my auto action. So from here, I'm going to go to settings and click on auto actions. And then I'm going to create a new auto action over here on the sidebar. I'm going to give it a clear name so my staff can find it. Let's say automatically enter a home study when application is approved. And then we have an option here to execute more than once per record. So these are for things that happen a bunch of times. Maybe you want to, every time the case stage changes, send an email. But for us, we're only going to be adding one home study per case, unless we're adding a home study renewal, which I won't get into too much here. So I'm just going to leave this blank. I don't want it to happen more than once. You can enter a memo or just leave it blank. So now it's sort of that backwards, forwards thinking. It's asking me on this page, what is the action that's going to trigger this to happen? So usually you're going to make auto actions on the update field. That's saying, hey, when a field in my system is changed, I want another action to happen. Next month, we're going to talk about scheduled auto actions, but today we're just going to be talking about update auto actions. So now what you need to do is find the field that triggers the auto action. So if you're not sure where the field lives, I like to cheat. So I go back to my cover page. I can find the field that I want to use as a trigger, this application approved date. If you open it up, there's a little option here that says View Field Properties. If you click on that, you're likely somewhat familiar with the Field Properties screen, but you can see that the application approved date is on the family case table. That's great. I can use that information, go back to my auto action configuration page. I can go to the family and I can click on the case table. And now I can find that application approved date. Here it is. So when the application approved date is not empty, that means, yes, it's been approved. I'm going to take an action. So I'll hit save here. And the action I want to do is actually insert a record. I want to insert a home study record. So I'm going to click on that. And now it's asking you, what kind of records do you want to insert? So I'm going to go ahead and add some fields from the home study table. So I'll go to table. The home study is under the family case. Scroll all the way down to home study. And I'll select a couple of home study fields to insert. So let's see, we can do home study type is home study. I'll do a couple other home study fields. Let's see. We won't want to talk about approving because that hasn't happened yet. I'm going to go ahead and do this home study packet sent date. This is a date field. And a cool option you have when you're setting up an auto action that has a date field is you can click on this little gear right here. And you can set the value of that field to be today. So I'm going to say when the application is approved, I'm going to insert a very basic home study record for home study, and there's going to be a home study packet sent that's today. And I'm going to do that packet in our next auto action, but that's enough for now. So I'm going to hit save. And we've got our auto action. So once you've created an auto action, if you're curious to see if it's correct, you can click this little button here that says View Records Matching this Criteria. And that gives you a whole list of families that Sam thinks would trigger this auto action. So if you click on it, you can take a look and say, oh yes, their application receive date is filled in, so that's correct. It would trigger this criteria. If you wanted to at this point, you could add some more filters. So let's say that we only want to have this happen on a particular family type or a case type. You can always click here next to filters and add a couple more filters here. But I'm going to keep this one really basic and just have it apply to all families whose application is approved. So let's go ahead and create another auto action that's going to send some information to my family. So the cool thing is if you've created one auto action and you know you need a similar one that's going to be based off some pretty similar criteria, you can click this Create New Auto Action from this one option in the sidebar. So I do this one a lot, especially if I'm doing a bunch of very related auto actions. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this. So now I'm thinking about my process. My home study rec has been inserted. I want to go ahead and communicate with my family and let them know that they've moved on to the home study process. So this auto action is going to be called Send Email to Family, Invite. I guess we want to send email to family to let them know they are starting the home study. Invite to checklist. Since we just worked on that public checklist last month, we'll go ahead and evolve that there. That's a really long title, but you know what? It's descriptive. We're not going to have this execute more than once. We're just going to send this email one time. I'll hit save. And then I'm brought right to my overview page here because I based off that last auto action. So the trigger is that application approved date is updated. It's not empty. But now I want to change the action. So I'm going to click this little edit button next to the action here. And instead of inserting a record, I'm going to send an email to my family. I've already created a template. So that's what I'm going to use here is a template that I've created. And it is called Home Study Checklist Invite. And then here, Sam's going to ask you, who do you want me to email this to? So I'm going to go ahead and do the App1 email, App2 email, and family email. That's hitting all the main emails. Scroll to the bottom, hit save. And then here, Sam's asking, hey, who do you want this email to be from in the from line? And you can keep it as the system default, or you can specify that you want it to be from their caseworker, whatever makes sense for your agency. But the caveat on this is that if you use a specific user, they have to go into their person record and set up email sending. If you have questions about setting up email sending, definitely send me a support question and I'll give you some more information. We also have a help guide on our site. But I'm going to assume that all my social workers have set up their email sending so I can use this option. You can also specify a different reply to. So I use this a lot when I send out emails and I want people to reply to support, but I'm going to keep this blank. They'll reply directly to their social worker. And then here you have an option to confirm before sending. I always like to have this up when I'm initially making an auto action, just because I like to make sure it works. Lots of people like to see it pop up and confirm it. Sometimes they like to edit it a little bit depending on whom they're sending it to. So you can certainly come back in later and take this confirm off. But for now, we're going to leave it up so you can see what happens when we do this trigger. So I've updated my action to send this template to the family. And that's based off that same criteria that application approved date is updated. So let's go ahead and test out these two auto actions that we created. Let's see if I can find a family that hasn't gotten these dates filled in yet. Let's see about these folks. So I have to change my cover page. Let's see. Nope, wrong button. Go back. Okay, well, they already have an application approved date. Darn it. Let's find somebody who doesn't have that filled in yet. We even have a case type. I need some better test records here. All right, so Betty does not have an application approved date filled in. And if I look at her checklist, I don't think she'll have anything. Nope, it's all blank. So I'm going to go ahead and test my auto actions by filling in this application approved date here. I'll enter it as today and hit save. All right, so right away, it's showing me that email that I wanted it to send. So it's filled in Betty's information. I'm going to hit cancel because I don't want this to actually send. Oh, and there were actually two auto actions. So it was two prompted up. This is the one that I showed you earlier. So it's inviting her to go to that public checklist and begin supplying me with some documents for her home study. This sort of stuff is showing up because this test record doesn't have emails associated. So it's saying, hey, you've got to tell me some emails. You won't usually see that. But from this point, you can either confirm or send. You can edit it to make it really specific for the particular client. Like maybe you know that, I don't know, you have something else you want to tell her. You can also add attachments here. You can just go ahead and confirm and send it. And I'm going to cancel because Betty's not real. And now let's check on our other auto action, which was to insert that home study record. Great, there's my home study record, which was inserted today by that auto action. It's pretty blank for now. Let's see. So I don't want to get too much into checklists just because we just did that, but you can see that now Betty has this home study section. And if you're ever curious to know why a section has or has not appeared automatically on your checklist, you can just go ahead and click on this checklist configuration and find your section. And right below it, it will tell you when it's going to enter. So Betty has this section now because the home study packet sent date was entered by our auto action. So that's just a little refresher on checklist automation. But let's go back to our auto actions and do something else. So we've notified our family. We've invited them to go in and start filling out that documentation on their public checklist. But let's go ahead and do another email to a caseworker, just to do that whole thing all over again, but with a caseworker. So I'm going to go to settings and click on auto actions. Create a new auto action, or you can base it off an existing one, but we'll go ahead and do the whole thing over again so you can see. And this will be notify caseworker that family has started home study process. This is only going to happen once, and I'll hit save. We're going to choose the field that causes this to trigger, so it's going to be updating a field. And let's go ahead and base it off of one of our home study fields. So I'll go down to family, then case, then home study. And let's do that home study packet date. So in my mind, I'm going to say that sending that invitation to log into their public checklist, that's my home study packet. Everything is up there. So the home study packet sent date is the trigger. When it's not empty, it's going to let the caseworker know something. So we'll save that. And the action is it's going to send an email. You can also add an alert to the record that just says, hey, the family has started the home study. But I find that emails are a little bit more actionable if you're talking about important milestones like the home study starting. Once again, I'm going to select a template. You can also just manually enter a little note here. It won't have anything particular to the record, which is why I like templates. Let's see, I know I made this one earlier. Here it is, notify caseworker when home study process begins. That's the template. And I'm going to send this to the caseworker's email. So come down here to that section, choose the social worker's email, hit save. It's just going to use the default settings. And I'm going to go ahead and click that confirm before sending. All right, so here at the top, you'll see this mad little thing here. This is a pretty common error that you'll get when you're setting up an auto action. And what it means is that the template that you're using is not using the same table or trigger field as your auto action. So this is a great demo to see how to troubleshoot it. If you go to your template, I think I can get to it. No, I can't. So I've got to go to settings, templates, search for notify caseworker. Now you've opened up your template. You can go ahead and click advanced options, tables on template, and take a look at what you're doing. So I used case manager details. I did not use the home study table. That means I'm going to either have to edit my template or edit my auto action. So I'm going to go ahead and edit my auto action. So I'm going to have to just use something from that case table. Well, we can go ahead and do the application approved date, since we know that the application approved date is also triggering that other auto action to insert the home study and notify the family. So I'm going to go ahead and use that one. So a lot is going to be happening when we approve an application. And you can see that big red message is gone. So if you see that big red message, don't worry. It's not like breaking your SAM system. It's just letting you know that there's something off between the template and the auto action. So I see this happen a lot. I still do it, obviously. And if you're ever confused, you can totally just hit that support link and say, hey, can you tell me why this is not working? I can't figure it out. But it looks like this is good to go now. Let's go ahead and test this newest one on another family. I don't know why my application approved date is not on all my cover pages on here, so I have to change it to home study because I know that one's got it under milestones. And they already have their date. Well, if you want to test, you can always go back to your auto action, and this execute more than once per record, you can temporarily set it to yes, then go back to your test record and trigger that field again. So I'll blank out this date, and then I'll fill it in again with today's date. And you can see it's triggering that first email we set up, inviting them to the document or to the public checklist. I'll cancel that one. And now it has our new email. So this is the email to our social worker that the family has started their home study. So I'll go ahead and cancel that one out. And then if you wanted to, you can check that checklist. Great, they've got the home study. They've got it twice since I triggered it twice. That's fine. And I'll go back to my auto action and change that execute more than once to no, since I know that it's working now. And hit save. All right, so we've got some time. I wanted to show you one more auto action. It's pretty similar, but I had a call with a client last week that was a little interesting because they have to send their families some basic information. I think it was for the post-placement process. And it was just like, hey, here's a packet of information. You just keep it for your records and please read it. But there was no real action that needed to happen from the family side, but they still wanted to record that they had sent that information to the family. So let's go back to that record here. On the home study checklist, I made an item on the checklist called home visit information provided. So this could be any sort of information that you're required to give out to your families. You want to make sure that you give it. They're not necessarily doing anything with it, but we want to track that it happened. And this is also a little demo in how to make auto actions based off checklists. So if we go back to that checklist configuration screen, we can do a little cheat again to figure out how to configure this. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this. I'm going to go down to this home visit information provided and click on it. And this takes me to that field properties screen. So once again, this is just a great way to know before you start creating an auto action where your field lives on your SAM site. So this lives on that home study table. So now I'm going to create an auto action that records that an email was sent to the family with this information, and it fills in that date on the checklist. So let's go to settings again, auto actions again, and we'll be creating two very similar auto actions. So I'm going to go ahead and create the first one, which is send family home visit information. This only happens once. I'll hit save, update a field. Let's see, if I go back to my home study. I'll go back to my family maybe. Well, we could base it off of that same field, the application receive date, or we can base it off something from the home study, that home study packet sent date. Let's go ahead and do it from the home study. So I'll do family, case, home study. And we'll do that home study packet sent date. It's not empty, and that will trigger this other email to send. I think I've created one, home visit information. And that'll just send to the family. Hit save. It can just come from the default, or you can specify that it came from the caseworker. I'll just do default, and I'll have it confirmed, so we'll see it pop up. So it's going to send an email to the family. And now I'm going to create another auto action from this one, because I also want to record that I sent this email. So I'm going to click Create New Auto Action from this one. And this will just be fill in the home visit information field. It'll only happen once, and I'll hit save. And now I need to change the action from sending an email to updating a field. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this, update a field. I'll add that home study. Oh, what was it? I have to go back to my configuration. There it is. It was on the home study table, and it's called home visit information provided. Oop. Go down to case, home study, home visit information provided. And I'm going to go ahead and use that nifty feature on date fields. Click the little gear icon and set that to the current date and hit save. Now I'll hit save again. And now let's go ahead and test this auto action. So let's see. Here is a home study packet sent date that is blank that I can test this auto action on. I'll fill it in as today's date. And you can see that in that email popped up that's providing some information to my family about what a home visit is. I can confirm and send it, and I'll cancel it because it's just a test record. Now I need to go back to my checklist. And you can see that the home visit information provided has been filled in with today's date. And we are actually at time. So that was a lot of information. Hopefully you benefited from just seeing me do the same thing over and over again. What I will say about auto actions is that it's a lot of experimentation. I don't always know going in what I'm going to end up creating. I usually keep that final thing in my mind. Like, I know I want to send an email to my family. What's the best way to trigger this email? I don't always know until I start poking around. So I certainly go in and edit auto actions a lot. I find ways to make them a little bit more efficient. I get a lot of feedback from my team, like, hey, this pop-up's annoying. I don't want to confirm the email, just send it off. So it's never set in stone. You can always experiment with and improve on your auto actions, but don't be afraid to get started. And a great place to start is these milestone dates. So if you have these big dates, which I think everybody does on their cases, take a look at them and think to yourself, what can I do to automate this? And here's just one more little hack. If you go to that field properties screen, you can take a look and see if these date fields are used on the auto actions. If you scroll down, it will tell you. hey, I don't have anything automated on this contract receive date. That's a pretty big date. That could be a great place to start with auto actions. So I'm going to go ahead and email you guys some resources that you can use to get started. And certainly get in touch with me. I'm always happy to answer questions. Just click that support link. I think I had another slide on here too. Oh, I've already gone off this. So yeah, take a look at that milestone. Ask your team, what are they sick of doing? Are they doing things over and over again? Sometimes multiple caseworkers are sending the same sort of email. That could be a template that you automate. Definitely consider scheduling a strategy call with our team. I had 2 great calls last week where we just knocked out like 8 auto actions in 1 hour call. Just go, go, go. It was really creative, like we kind of bounced ideas off each other. Sometimes you just need that outside voice to get you to think about your process. And then that toast exercise that I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, it's a great way to get your team thinking about systems efficiency and how you can start automating. So I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar, and thank you so much for joining me. I will be in touch in about half an hour or so, and the webinar will also be recorded and posted up on our blog. So thanks to everybody. Certainly, I hope you join us next month. We're going to be doing scheduled auto actions, and I'll invite you to RSVP for that in the email as well. So have a great day, everyone. Bye.